So the Parashas Shoftim is one of those parashiyot that basically you don't, it gives you a chance to understand and appreciate what type of Torah we have in our possession. Most of the Torah that we learn, that we live by, for the most part, it has an eternal feel to it, and the mitzvahs have an eternal feel to it. Even though you can't imagine putting on tefillin in Olam HaBah, not the ones we have right now. You can't imagine keeping Shabbos the way we keep Shabbos right now in Olam HaBah, but it's not a stira. You can see how that mitzvah can continue on into the future without much of a problem. But in this week's parsha, you get to Shoftim v'Shotrim. You have judges who basically have to decide cases of it could be anything from murder cases to financial situations, and then on top of that would be bad enough. But then you have Shotrim, which are the enforcers. So you can't imagine, police force, the Mossad, CIA, or actually not so much, they're more like information gatherers, but you can't imagine the police forces existing in Yemos Mashiach. What job are they going to have, right? And Techis Amazing for sure not, and the Olam HaBah also for sure not. So, you used to wonder, so how, where's the eternity of these mitzvahs? Where's the nischus of these mitzvahs? You can see how basically these are mitzvahs that are just temporary for the situation we have right now. These are laws that were laid down because people are not living at the level they should be living, the golden calf and the meraglim and the Torah we have in our possessions, Torah's Bria as opposed to Torah's Tzilas, which is Torah's Mashiach. So, it's what's the basis of the Torah that we have right now, that you have these mitzvahs that we have to do, and what do these things look like? What do these mitzvahs look like later on in the future? Because whatever concepts behind Shoftim and Shotrim has to be eternal. There's not a single mitzvah, even though it may have an everyday application. There's not a single mitzvah that is not based in some type of eternal concept. So this is an interesting piece that again, it's not what people think about, but it's important to have this perspective because it tells you what type of world we're living in and how to function within it. We for the most part, and almost everybody, even though we know there was Luchas Rishonis and there was Luchas Shnius, right? We know that. That's all part of. It's been the movies already. It's been we learned in the Cheder, and different pshatim is exactly what happened, how Moshe broke them. But we know there were two sets of luchas. What's the fundamental difference? Well, the first set of luchas were not only written by Kodesh Baruch Hu, but they were carved up by Kodesh Baruch Hu, and therefore were a lot cheaper. I'm just kidding. But the second set, because there was no labor, no unions, nothing to deal with basically at that point in time, no side benefits. But the second set of luchas were carved up by Moshe Rabbeinu, and they're written on by Moshe Rabbeinu, and that makes all the difference in the world between the mitzvahs, the Torah as we have it right now, and the Torah that was meant to be in our possession in the first place. The Lashem explains that the first set of luchos only had two mitzvahs on it. Even though we talk about the Aseret Dibros, but the two mitzvahs were Anochi Shem Elokecha, right? And the second one was Lo Yeh Elohim Acherim. And basically,
so they translate them in English.
I am Lord your God, who took you out of Mitzrayim, right? So they have to be your Meshubah to me. And the second one is that there can't be any other gods besides me. So explains that just like, for example, in Gan Eden, Adam and Rishon also only had two mitzvahs, even though the mitzvah not to eat. But in terms of two active mitzvahs he had to do, one was shamar as a gun, right? He had to protect the gun, and the other one was to work it. Right, so shmira is always a function of mitzvahs losasa. It's always a negative mitzvah. The losasa mitzvahs are there specifically to help us protect the world from being destroyed. And avoda is always a positive thing. So therefore, it alludes to all the positive mitzvahs. So when Adam Rishon kept those two mitzvahs, he kept all the positive mitzvahs that are included in the mitzvah of avodas Hashem, and the other mitzvah of shmira was basically all the negative mitzvahs. He didn't have to have every mitzvah spelled out on his Madrega in the Garden of Eden with these mitzvahs. When he did these things, had the kavanah for all these mitzvahs and those two mitzvahs. So likewise, the Jewish people got to the level of Adam Rishon before the Chet, when they said Nasav and Nishma, and the result was that they were also in the level of Shema v'Avda as a gun, right? Shema v'Avda, right? Those are the two mitzvahs they got to. They came out as Anochi Shem Elokecha And the other one of Elohi Elohim Acharim that was in the mitzvah that would correspond to the Shemra, the guard itself. So that's the difference in terms of the actual mitzvahs. What does it mean in terms of the reality, the siyas of everyday life? Well, obviously, the world that we see around us, which is falling apart once again, and never really got to act together, and all the crime, and all the machlokus, and hatred, and zinizchinim, and the chulu, all that's a function of the second set of tablets, as opposed to the first set of tablets, which is the world was a perfect place. It was messianic. The first luchos are the messianic luchos, the second luchos are not. They're the world of everyday life we live in right now. So the Leshem says, "V'yachar kol dvarim halalu." After all these things that we just spoke about previously, right? Hinei yuvan lanu od inyan echad ne'alam. Right? We got to understand another, pretty hidden matter. Mashin shichavtu b'zeh kama kadoshi elyon. Right? That many holy commentators basically tried to deal with, explain, and understand. U'mashalot nizkar b'Torah. Right, the Torah, everyone knows, it's like Cheder 101, and it's like Kita Aleph, we talk about Olam HaBah, not so much it's amazing, but Olam HaBah, and Yemos Mashiach is going to come, and this is not the perfect world, and that's the kivun. We're all thinking to ourselves, Olam HaBah, somewhere in the back of our mind, hopefully in the front of our mind. The whole Torah comes down to that. As the Ramchal points out, this is, we're just passing through over here. This world is to perfect ourselves, to become like a Kodesh Baruch Hu, for the sake of being Nena from Ziva Shechina, forever and ever and ever, in Olam HaBah. That's what we live for. So it's an amazing thing that there's no mention whatsoever in the Torah that we have of Olam HaBah. And that's why it's such a tough sell. Someone's becoming Chosi B'Tshuvah, you try to explain to him that we're all going to what to come. He says, how do you know? What do you open up? So you open up a sefer, Hashkafa sefer, the Ramchal, the Gra speaks about it, and the Sefer Kabbalah speak about that. But the Torah is the basis of our entire religion. It's our entire das, right? It's basically what we're building ourselves upon. So it should be there. It's like going to college, and they never tell you which degree you're going to get, if you'll get a degree at all. And you ask all the people, the leaders and the Menahelim and all the teachers, how do you know that there's some kind of degree at the end of all this? It says it's a Masorah, it's a tradition, right? You're putting all this time into college courses you don't want to sit through and have to go through, but it's part of the process to become a lawyer, a doctor, a professional, whatever the case may be. And somehow there's a shmua that's been passed down from generation to generation. If you go to Yale, you go to Harvard or Columbia, or wherever the case may be. I'm from Canada, I don't know the colleges, right? Those are the most famous ones, right? So somehow you... McGill. Western, Waterloo. What's that? But if you would go to these places, who would go? It's only because it's written right there in the brochure or online now on the website that if you go through this following course, you'll get an LLB or an LCBO. Whatever. That's a liquor store. But MD, MMD, PhD, a whole bunch of initials you can add to that if you want to, right? And that's what you're relying upon. It's a promise. It's avtach. It's guaranteed, and that's what's driving you through the whole thing. And here you're talking about the Torah, all this Mesiras Nefesh, and all this good being promised, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but it's all Olam Hazeh. You'll get the land, your children will also get the land, you'll have Brucha, and this, but there's no mention you're going to the world to come. Right? In the Gemara, you have references to Olam HaBah, Mucha L'chai L'mim, right? Ashrei, Rabbi Akiva, he's going to the world to come. So but that's all Torah Shebal Peh. It's all later on. It's all the Hashkafa Sforim. And there weren't even early Hashkafa Sforim. Going back, the Gemara itself was only recorded in 499 CE. The Mishnah 186 CE. So before that, it was all Baal Peh. There were manuscripts and things like that, but it's all personal manuscripts. It's a tough sell. It's very confusing. So why would you leave out? So you could say that they shouldn't serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu not Lakabel Praz. Right, that doesn't fly so very, that's like a plane with one wing, basically. So he says the following: Ayin b'sefer kliyakar, Parashas b'chukosai b'pasav hislachti b'sochachem shemevi sham midrei gedol olam shiva tirutzim al zeh the kliyakar, and in Parashat Kisavo coming up, he mentions 7 different answers for why this is the case. You see, it's bothering everybody. It's 7 different answers. Like one answer is not good enough because it's really a problem. So he says, Ayin Sham. Amnam. Achron Chaviv. The last one is the best. Masha Kasab Zeh Hashla. Bakdamas told us Adam. Like the Shla himself has an answer, and that's the best one of all, as far as he's concerned. And Babaisa Achron. Ayin Sham. Divrei Pi Chacham. Chein V'Sai Yishak. Right? So the words of the Chacham, the mouth of Chacham, is full of chein, and you drink from his lips. Okay. Ach sod ha'inyan bezeh, but the sod, right, the Kabbalah behind this, who are pimasha marnis, what we're talking about. Kerei kolator kula lefi giluya levusha shehi ata lifnenu harei enu mavtiach shum tova v'shum schar. Right, the Torah we have in our possession right now, that we open up on Shabbos during the week, read all the time, it doesn't talk about any reward per se, or punishment, or at least reward, right? Ela rak l'aseh l'shomra l'chokra l'dorsha l'misha mid nembam b'kiyuma. Only for the person who keeps the Torah. It mentioned you do the following thing and you'll get the following benefit. Basically, that's all it talks about. It's always a din-related reality. It doesn't talk about one day there's going to be this fantastic world to come. The shechina will be so powerful and you'll be overwhelmed by it. You won't eat, you won't drink. That's what the Gemara says, right? But the Torah itself doesn't talk about that. The whole gilui, the whole revelation of the Torah in our possession only speaks about what happens according to a person's actions. You do the following good thing, here's the following divine response. You do the following bad thing, here's the following divine response. That's the way it's set up. V'kol mishpat, v'kol din, it's all mishpat and din. That's the entire Torah we have right now. Amnam hatikva hasidah d'cholchem is Israel, but the promised, desirable thing, and we long for, what the Jewish people live for in the future, shehen kol Yehudim achronim yemos Mashiach v'chayim HaBah, right? It's all the Yehudim, the appointed times that will come up later on in history of Yemos Mashiach and living in the world to come. Hinei hein teluim be'emes rak b'bris. Because really those things are not Olam HaBah and Techisa Meisim and Yemos Mashiach even is not tului on Meisim. It's not based upon our Meisim per se. It's based upon a promise that we're going to get these things, right? What the Torah is talking about schar v'onish is talking about based upon your Meisim, right? If you do the following thing or the following effect, right? But in terms of those fantastic Yehudim, which come up later on after the world has been rectified, and we're on our way to Yom HaMashiach onward, that's a function of bris. The Kosh Baruch Hu made with Avraham Avinu back at the beginning. V'lo b'schus, it's not totally b'schus, not based upon merit. V'hu bris avos Yisrael, and that's the promise that Kosh Baruch Hu made to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that we will get this. If we're loyal to Kosh Baruch Hu all through the years, we will get these things at the end of history. V'bris lo tafel leilam, and that never wears out. Schus, as the Gemara says in Shabbos, as Tosfos brings down, can wear schus avos to fire. It can be used up, just like a bank account. You can get a trust fund. Your father can leave you some money. It could be a lot of money, but it's got a gvul, it's got a limit, and it will be used up. If you spend it too fast, it goes very quickly. Likewise, schus avos was really used up a long time ago, even before Mitzrayim or in Mitzrayim. And there are other schuyot since then, the Mesiras Nefesh of Klal Yisrael, and various different things we've gone through. But the essence of schus avos was used up way back when, and that, if it was based upon that, we would not have enough gas to get up the hill. Right? We would not be able to get over the hill to find out what's the nice stuff on the other side that's waiting for us, because we don't have the schuyot. I mean, look around today, the world today, the Jewish people today. I mean, we've been around for a long time, but and there are all kinds of schuyot, Mesiras Nefesh. I mean, without the Holocaust, for example, the amount of Mesiras Nefesh would be much, much less, because the Holocaust brought out tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. It was mezaka us. It's an awkward thing to say, because obviously what a terrible thing, but that's what Yisurim does. Yisurim is mezaka the person, and it's extreme like that will bring out tremendous Mesiras Nefesh that normally wouldn't necessarily be the case. I mean, just count the amount of times in your life you had to be Moser Nefesh for Kodesh Baruch Hu. I mean, really Moser Nefesh. Not like, I got up half an hour early this morning, could have slept in, done a later minyan. What Mesiras Nefesh? People use that term. We don't even understand exactly what Mesiras Nefesh means in our generation. In fact, the Shem Shmuel, I think, believed back in his time, he already said the Mesiras Nefesh was already a thing of the past. I mean, you look at the Gemara, you look at the stories. We don't quite relate to them, but the Tanoim and how they were mostly nefesh for Kosh Baruch Hu, it's all relative, right? It's all relative. It's all based upon the generation, what the generation is capable of. Kosh Baruch Hu is machshiv our Mesiris Nefesh, was really Mesiris Nefesh for us, even though compared to previous generations, it wasn't the same thing. Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg was once speaking to us and tried to help us understand how spoiled our generation was. And he was basically telling us that when he was in yeshiva, there was no such thing as carpet, no such thing as air conditioners, no such thing as fancy libraries, basically. And for breakfast, you had onions and potatoes. That was breakfast. And for lunch, you had potatoes and onions. And for supper, if you were lucky, you had onions and potatoes again. And that's basically the way it was. He's like, and you didn't complain. I once went to a well-known yeshiva in New York. I was a guest of somebody. It's just passing through on the way back to Israel. And where I came from, Israel, we didn't have breakfasts like that. Usually was leftover spaghetti from the night before. Unless you bought your own. The bread was always fresh, right? Which is why you gain so much weight. The bread was always tremendous, but it wasn't fancy food like they have today in a lot of yeshivas. And went to this place. We had to pay extra, but it was very, very, very low. It was obviously subsidized. I was like shocked. I walked in. You know how they have the hotels, they have it all set up with those metal things, scrambled eggs and the potatoes, like every single morning. This is what the Borchim got to choose from. You had to pay a little bit towards it, but not that much. And if most kids probably could afford, and those who probably couldn't, maybe got a discount, but it's like, it's not like it used to be in the past. But Moshe finds, since it's all in a tshuva, and he was nifted in the 80s, but he was talking back in the 70s, and he was talking about basically why it is that most of the Gedolim always came from Europe. And he said, in America today, back in his time, even an ani has meat on several occasions a year. Somehow chicken, meat, whatever, he can get his hands on it. But in Europe, the story is basically people hung out in the butcher shop and took the bones that were thrown out, take a homemade soup from that was their meat for Yanta. That's all they could afford. He says the amount of Mesiris Nefesh that people put into learning in Torah in Europe, that's what produced the Gedolim, because basically you're kind of Torah with your neshama. When you're Mesiris Nefesh, that's what you are. That's your currency. The currency to acquire Torah is your nefesh, so to speak. The more you give of yourself, the more the Torah will give back to you. So you can learn all you want, right? You can go through Shas several times, and it won't make that much of a difference. Versus some, in fact, this is the pshat on the Gemara. The Gemara is talking about the Chassidim Rishonim, not the Chassidim from Poland and down here, right? But the ones from the time of Tanoim, the Mishnah, before there was this break of groups, talking about basically the pious people of that generation. And the famous Mishnah, and the Gemara that follows, that the Chassidim Rishonim used to daven for an hour for Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, right? But they took an hour before Shachris to daven. They prepared themselves, an hour after to come down again, and then an hour before Mincha, and altogether about 9 hours of davening. 9 hours of davening or davening related matters. Mm-hmm. That's 9 hours out of your day, plus I don't know if I'm going to say slept, probably not that much, but it doesn't leave much time for learning or working. So the Gemara asks the obvious question: what happened to their learning, and what happened to their parnasa? The Gemara only answers it was nishmar. It was nishmar. Well, that's the way the Gemara leaves it. Sorry, you have to understand, what does that mean? Nishmar. What does it mean?
What does that translate?
It means like it was protected. It was like somehow, there was a special siyata d'shmaya. But what it comes down to, it means basically that they could accomplish in a much less amount of time what the average person who was not pouring their kishkes into tefillah would accomplish over many hours. And that's what the Shema is basically saying. That if you will listen to my mitzvahs and do my you'll get all these things, I'll give it to you. The Rambam in Parashat Mishnayos writes that the Shema means if you take care of the ruchnias, I'll take care of the gashmis. That's what Kosh Baruch Hu tells Klal Yisrael. If you're focused on the ruchnias, I'll help you in the ruchnias and the gashmis together. But if you're going to get involved in the gashmis, then you can't expect yourself to get the kind of bruch. You might be successful, but you'll have to work for it and work pretty hard at the same time. It won't be nishmar. Whatever you get, you'll earn a little shayt to the shmai, but not as much as a person who's putting all of the koiches into tefillah. That's why it's like people, not to be judgmental, but before you race through davening, and learn, to get back to your Gemara, or during Chazor Tzashatz, which is the halacha, basically is not to do it, you have to learn at that time. But the more respect you show to tefillah, even though learning is extremely important, it's the essence of who we are, but there are gvulot, as the Gemara says in Brochas. Tefillah is one of those things that stand at the heights of the world, but people walk all over. They don't appreciate it. Those who appreciate it, really appreciate it. Those who don't, really don't. There's very little middle ground in between. But if it's Yeta D'Shma you want, if you want a Kosh Baruch Hu to help you out, the whole point of learning Torah and the whole point of davening is all one and the same thing. In fact, we learned this, a little bit of a digression, but it's worth it because Rosh Hashanah is coming up. It's Rosh Chodesh Elul tonight, right? We started the David, working on a relationship, Ani L'Dodi Li. That's really what it sums it up. Ani L'Dodi Li. That's what it's about. Ani L'Dodi Li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. All comes down to relationship. It's all about that. So Avraham is talking to Kodesh Baruch Hu in Parashas Vayera, right? And Kodesh Baruch Hu is talking to Avraham. And he has bris milah 3 days after bris milah, because Baruch is mavaker him as a bikur cholim, paying a visit. And Avraham, in the midst of this conversation, because Baruch Hu sees that Avraham cannot be pacified, he has to. His refuah is to have guests, even in spite of his pain. So because Baruch Hu brings the 3 Arabs along, and Avraham runs to them in the middle of the conversation, doesn't even put Kosh Baruch Hu on hold, doesn't press the hold button, just runs right to these people, and then he comes back. What's even more amazing is that Kodesh Baruch Hu is waiting for him, and he picks up the conversation exactly where he left off. And it wasn't like a 5-minute, I'll be right back type of a thing. He goes out, they prepare the food, they have a suda, the whole thing, and only later on he picks up the conversation where he left off. It's a remarkable thing. So either Kodesh Baruch Hu has tremendous patience, which obviously he does, right, or the conversation never ended. It just changed the mode of discussion. It's like, for example, you're talking to a person, and you got a sore throat. So first you start talking vocally, with your, but you can't keep going because it's too difficult. Take a pad and a pen and start writing down the notes, right? If that, gets too hard to write too well. If you know sign language, I usually sign language, perhaps, or symbols or something, and pointing at things. But the conversation never ended. Just the mode of discussion, the mode of transmitting the material, the ideas changed, but the conversation was ongoing. So when Avraham went from talking to Kodesh Baruch Hu and then taking care of the orachim the way he was supposed to, the hilchasa, the conversation never ended. The form of the communication just changed. So therefore, he never put a Kodesh Baruch Hu on hold. He simply changed the form of dialogue. And then when that form of dialogue came to a conclusion, he picked up where he left off at the end, and therefore the conversation never stopped. That's what V'yikra means. Right? The Aleph on V'yikra, as Rashi points out, transforms the word V'yikar into V'yikra. And what does V'yikra mean? It means that a Jew is online with the Kodesh Baruch Hu 24/7. We never go offline. Right? V'yikar means we do. A person can. That's Bilam. Right? It's happenstance. It's like random. It's not a controllable thing. Kodesh Baruch Hu will talk to you when he wants it. V'yikra means that a Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to have an ongoing dialogue with a person. But he appreciates, even when you go to sleep at nighttime. That's why you make all, brachas before you go to bed and brachas when you wake up. You didn't stop talking to Kodesh Baruch Hu if you slept the proper way. What do you mean the proper way? It means like you prepared yourself for sleep. And Rizal used to tell his Talmidim before they went to bed, he used to look at their forehead and tell them the pasuk they would be learning that night in the basement Shalamala, so they could prepare it before they went up there, to be familiar with it. And that way they would take advantage of the opportunity when Shemaim, when they came back the next morning, they were ahead of the game already. They advanced their appreciation and understanding. So that is really what the din on Rosh Hashanah is all about. Where are you in that conversation? How many times did you hang up on a Kodesh Baruch Hu through the course of the year? How many times did you not pick up the phone? Right? Oh, that's Hashem called. Pretend I'm not here right now. It's like, I'll let my Takoli pick that one up. But anyhow, so Schus Avos can run out, but Bris Avos does not. V'chein Omer Rabbeinu Tam, right? But Tosfos in Shabbos Nimhei Amar Aleph Mas B'Shmuel. The Schus Avos Tama, Aval Bris Avos Lo Tama. Schus Avos can end, but Bris Avos does not end. V'chein Hu Meforsh B'Torah B'Soch Klalos the Torah's Kohanim. Likewise, it says at the end of Sefer Vayikra, It says beferish in the clause in the Parashat Bechukusai, the av gam zos v'chulu lo ma'astim v'lo galtim v'chlosa v'hafer brisi, right? Itam ki ani Hashem lokecha. Even Kodesh Baruch Hu says at the end of Parashas Bechukusai, in spite of all this, in spite of all the anger you caused me, in spite of all the agros nefesh you caused, in spite of the fact that really I should have dumped you a long time ago, nevertheless, I will never destroy the bris because the bris is eternal. And it's explained, explains that even for the Aver Avodah Zarah, Kodesh Baruch Hu does not cancel the bris with Klal Yisrael. A person can choose out of it. A person can become, literally cut himself off by going the exact opposite direction. But if a person is involved in Averis, but is not being made for the bris, so then he's still included. The commotion before Sham, the Parshas al Pigri Gilulechem, also habris hinehu gam lechol yachid v'yachid Yisrael beprat. And likewise, it's not just a bris that's made with the entire Jewish people, but it's also a bris that's made with every individual Jew. Every individual Jew is a special bris of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, a gra, Parashat Etzavim, etc. Kisod bris avos v'Yisrael bi'arnu b'kam mukamis b'devrenu kihu b'tafresh chof amudi b'nesivus or hanizkar b'tfilos b'nechunya b'nekana b'second tzivos. Okay, it's a little more complicated, but it just means basically the bris itself goes at the very, very top of the whole system. The 620 amudi, or whatever you want to call them, basically are made up of the 613, like these lights are the shorashim, the roots of the Targum Mitzvot that we have, plus the 7 mitzvot of the Rabbanim. So anyone who says it's only the Rabbanim, they should know that only the Rabbanim is actually a mistake. That really there are mitzvahs that Kodesh Baruch Hu gave to us as part of the Targum Mitzvot, but the mitzvah the Rabbanim that came later on, Kodesh Baruch Hu always intended those mitzvahs. The root for those mitzvahs goes way up. So he says that's where the bris comes from. This bris obviously at the very top, and etc. etc. That's the Kabbalah behind it. He says the ayin v'sham husod shores called the chen amru b'reishis b'shvi Yisrael nikru reishis. Right, that's what the Torah means. It says b'reishis means for the sake of reishis, Kodesh Baruch Hu made the world. It means basically that you have different levels of reality. Okay, you have the lowest level of reality in which we live right now, and that is a world of din. And you have worlds above it as well. But at a certain point, our mitzvahs, our maisim, our tefillas can be mashpia on the world only so far. Today, not even that far at all. There's a lot of malachim in between us and the Kodesh Baruch Hu before it finally gets to Gemor Chagiga, talking about Nebuchadnezzar who wanted to go to Shemayim. I forget the whole cheshbon, but it's kilos like this, where the Kodesh Baruch Hu says, calls him Russia, Ben Russia, Haya Ben Russia, that just to go across one rakia takes 500 years. 500 years not exactly time that we have right now, but it's a very far distance, right? It's like kilos 500 years, and there's 7 of those, and they get bigger each one as you go further away, right? We're not talking like levels of atmosphere over here. We're talking about the rakia. So that's if you were talking about time, that would be about 35,000 years right there. And then that's only to get to the legs of the Ophanim, right? And the Ophanim, their feet are huge. The cross though would take even all the amount of time to cross the rakia is only enough to cross the feet of the Ophanim. And then you got to cross the rest of the body. It gets bigger and bigger because basically that. To keep things in perspective, the world in which we live is like a pinhead on the pinhead of a pinhead. As big and as vast as this physical universe seems to be, because we haven't quite got to the edge of it yet, right? We're working on it, but we haven't quite got there yet, that it's nothing compared to the world in which that universe exists. Because they get geometrically bigger. The world of Atzilus is monstrous compared to the world of Bria, which is bigger than the world of Yetzirah, which is bigger than the world of Asiyah, which is the world in which we find ourselves right now. So therefore, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Nebuchadnezzar, that you couldn't even, you want to go to Shemayim, you can't even, you're so far away. Now there's different ways to understand that. On one hand, it could mean distance. On the other hand, it means that, we talk about going to the world to come, right? You have to be a Ben Olam HaBah, You have to be there one day. You have to do what to come. Working ourselves, working our mitzvahs. What are we holding right now? That's the din we'll see on Rosh Hashanah. That's the question they ask in Rosh Hashanah. Are you a Ben Olam HaBah? That's the question. Right now, if you were to die, would you go to the world to come? What do you think? Right? Where would you place yourself? Yeah, close? Maybe, yes. Give me a little bit more time. Right?
Not immediately.
Mhm.
Not immediately.
No, I mean, it's a kind of a toss-up. We flip on this one, it's like, So what the Gemara is telling us is that we have no hasaga. We have no comprehension of how holy and how perfect. As perfect as we get in this world, we come close to perfection, the perfect this, the perfect that, but as perfect as these things are, they don't come anywhere close to the perfect you. There's a perfection of yourself out there. You have no idea what it's about. One day you'll see it. You won't believe you ever thought you could live on this level that you're living on right now. As hard as we struggle. The Gemara is to say that Nebuchadnezzar, you couldn't even get close to the front door. You're so far away. You're lucky you even exist b'chala whatsoever. Because the reality of what you are does not come close. The Gemara says in Olam HaBah, tzaddikim sit around in a circle, but not really a circle that we have today, right? And they don't eat, they don't drink, there's no proof of review, there's none of this stuff. Basically, a person say, it's boring. Once I was teaching a beginner's class way, way back. Some guy, first exposure probably to Hashkafa, taken right off the wall. I don't know how they got him in there in the first place. And it was my turn to teach. And I was talking about Olam HaBah. And this guy, who I thought I would never hear from, puts up his hand and he says to me, his rabbi, just tell me one thing. I wasn't a rabbi at that time. Rabbi, tell me one thing. Is there basketball in the world to come? I didn't want to lie. Actually, I did want to lie, but I wasn't sure I was right to do it. Of a different kind, right? You never miss up there. But it's like, no. And his whole thing was, then I don't want to go. Man, will it be boring up there? Because that's the world that we know down here. Bris Avos, the lesson's explaining, is an idea that goes way above, way to the top of the system. We're not talking the top of the Sears Tower. What's the tallest building these days in the world? I don't know. But we're not talking into outer space. We're not talking to the edge of the universe. Bris Avos is a concept that's rooted so high up in the system that, by definition, we can't be mashpia on it. We can't affect it. We can't invoke it, and we can't stop it from happening. Because Baruch Hu controls it completely. When we say the Yigibus Midas Rachamim, we do have ashpa to some degree, which we would never have known if Hakadosh Baruch Hu did not reveal it to Moshe Rabbeinu, which is what the whole din on the Sefer HaShavua is all about. It all revolves around the Yud Midas Rachamim, because Baruch Hu is Megala, which never come back empty. Why they never come back empty? Because they affect the world way beyond schus and chof. That's the world in which we live. A world of schus and chof right now. So because of that, the Torah we have addresses that. But Olam HaBah, and what the Mashiach is talking about, it's a whole different Metzias, it's a whole different reality. They belong, because they're based upon Bris Avos, they belong to a much higher level of reality. The Torah that we have right now in our possession, because it's been designed for the world in which we live right now, could not address it. It was left out because it's as relevant as talking about, even less so, about the Chis Mesim, first thing most of the Chis Mesim and Olam HaBah, as it would be talking to a kindergarten group about the legal profession. Even that's not even comparable. It's like walking to a bunch of kindergarten students and saying, let me tell you today what the first year of college is like for those who study law. It's like, what? What's that? What's college? It's not relevant. The conversation doesn't apply to anything going on there. You want to practice your speech? That's one thing. But don't expect the kids to relate to that. It's not part of their world. Likewise, as much as we throw around the terms, Yemos Mashiach and HaBah, they don't really belong to reality. Because we're living in a world right now of schus avos to a large degree. It's a world of schar v'onesh, not schar v'onesh like the world to come, but basically cause and effect relationship. Because Baruch Hu says, here's the world of din, you do this, you get that. You do the wrong thing, this is going to be the response, because that's the way the world is made. That's the way the world is made. So that actually kind of like leads into a, do you want to ask something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, if we always talk about the Torah being like the blueprint, so you would imagine that somewhere, even though I understand you're saying it's not like really relevant to be put in the Torah itself, but I mean,
so
that's
the
really
Gemara,
the
Gemara asks your question. You ever learned the 11th parak of Sanhedrin Chiluk? So the first few dafim basically is techis and mesim the Torah menayim. What do we know? Techis, the Gemara brings all kinds of psukim down with the remez in the pasuk that could not be talking about Alam Hazeh. Because, for example, there's reference to Aaron Cohen after he's after he's going to be dead later on in the future. There's a few instances where the Gemara brings down cases that from this pasuk clearly, as much as it has an everyday application, the actual main point of this pasuk really has to allude to a future time instead, when people will come back again, and that will be Techis HaMesim.
Okay,
So there are Ramazim. That's the whole point. Because also you have Pardes. Pshat is Jerusalem Sod. So on a Sod level, for sure it's going to be there. And in fact, if you learn Kabbalah, you can see that the Rizal points out in the Psukim, you can see the Ramazim to things like that, talking about that. But the Zohar for sure brings down the whole concept of Techis HaMesim lasting either 210 years or 214 years, based upon Rav Yehuda versus Rav Yitzchak, comes from the pasuk about and that's 40 years. That's after 40 years of kibbutz galios. That comes after the pasuk where it says that Yitzchak was 40 years old when Parashas told us. The whole thing comes out in Medrash Nelam and Parashas told us right from that pasuk there about Yitzchak being 40 years old at the time that he had children, or the daven for children, right? At that point, that pasuk. So the Ramazim for sure are there. It's all there, right? But at a pshat level is dealing with the everyday reality of everyday life. So that really, brings in the whole issue. For example, the other part of the parsha, talking about the Yom Miklat. The Yom Miklat is also an interesting halakha in this respect, just like Shoftim v'Shotrim, which seems to be very, here and now type of mitzvah. Likewise, what's the Yom Miklat? The Yom Miklat, if somebody goes out to the classic case, someone goes out to the forest, chopping wood, basically, didn't check the thing, before he, was it called the garzon? Was it called the Hebrew? And he didn't check it before the metal piece, before he went chopping wood, and he starts chopping, the piece goes flying off, and lo and behold, and unfortunately, Nebuch, Rahman Islam, somebody happens to be walking by, happens to find it in the wrong way, right, and it kills him. So what happens? This guy is called the accidental murderer. We have to have Yer Miklat. 3 of them on the east side of Jordan, 3 of them are in Israel, 3 more later on, I think, in Syria, that, or no, 3 more in the future or something like that. But the point is that he has to run there, he has to live there the rest of his life because he's an accidental murderer. And nobody can, the Goel Adam, if he catches him along the way after the din, that he can kill him and take revenge. And the whole thing is very, very bizarre. How can someone be killed accidentally? There's a case in the Gemara where the Malach HaMavis, also Chagigah, where it sends somebody, one of the Malachim, to take Magdalena, somebody, and he makes a mistake with another Magdalena, I think, and takes her, and he brings her, and he says to him, I told you to bring another one, but she's here anyhow, so, we'll take her while she's here. Why go back a second time? So again, it seems like she died before her time. So this is basically the same type of an idea, that the Torah itself, there's no such thing as accidents, by definition. Everything is completely a function of Hashgacha Pratis, right down to every last prat. As the Medrash says, there's even a malach over a blade of grass telling it to grow. Then comes the gardener, cuts it down, poor malach's out of a job until the grass grows back again. It's amazing, but we look at these birds of paradise. And, the plant every year yields like remarkable flowers, just absolutely remarkable flowers. But it's really amazing. Normally you can see flowers budding, and then you see them slowly growing and evolving to becoming a flower. So these things, we're looking at them, and we had some of them for a while, so we knew they must be coming out soon. And I was checking this thing every single day. For maybe 2 days I didn't check. And I turn around, and there's like one sticking out. Like perfect. Like it wasn't like a little piece. It was like the whole thing. Like it just popped out. And I thought to myself, wow, it's amazing. Like it's cute. It's it's a nice, like magic the way that happens, right? And the next day, 2 more are there. Just like but there's a malach making that happen. A malach on behalf of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. The malach is not doing independently. The malach, like Mazel, acts as an intermediary for Kodesh Baruch Hu's shefa. Everybody has a malach overlooking them. Everybody's a malach as an intermediary for Kodesh Baruch Hu's light. The shefa coming down to it. So you daven for more shefa, it's got to come to the malach because that's his job. Very rarely does a Kodesh Baruch Hu bypass the malach. It'd be better not to have the malach. That's the result of the instance of the rest. So likewise, there's no way in the world it's not possible for somebody to be killed accidentally. So Rashi brings down elsewhere, the Gemara brings down in Mod Katan, he's talking about the whole idea of Galus and not Mod Katan, it's in Makos. The Makos, right? Talking about halachas of Galus and what happens. The classic case of a person having to be exiled, or not exiled, but how the whole thing, hashkachli plays out. So what happened basically was someone killed purposely, premeditatively, but there were no witnesses. Somebody killed accidentally, again there were no witnesses in the end. So what does Kosh Baruch Hu do? Kosh Baruch Hu brings them both to the same pundak, and the guy who killed purposely is walking underneath the ladder. The guy who killed accidentally is walking down the ladder, and as he's walking down the ladder, the wrong breaks. He falls down, kills the guy, which is also unusual, but here he happens to kill him. Now they're witnesses to the whole thing. They see a guy who seems to be killed accidentally, but he's actually the guy who deserves the death penalty. There's nobody carried out. And the guy who killed accidentally, now they're witnesses, and he has to go into Galus. So what do we learn from all that? What's this supposed to teach us? This is the Yesod. This is the Yesod. This is the Soda itself as well. That there's a master plan to Maaseh Bereshis. There's nothing you can do about it. It's already been written. You can't change it. And you know one of the reasons why you can't change it? Because the Kosh Baruch Hu knows the end. For him, if I'm an author, I'm a writer, right? You can change my script because I'm limited. I don't know the future. You can go in there and you can write. Ever notice how there are things where they shouldn't happen, but they happen anyhow? Why should they happen? Because this person, Nebuchadnezzar, got sick, and 15,000 people came in and said Tehillim for this person, and the person died anyhow. But somebody else had 25 people daven for them, and they almost died, but they survived instead. So some of the kind of cheshbon involved over here, but who knows? Historically, we're watching a world right now. It's unbelievable. I mean, the more I read about this, the more I talk about it, I think about it. It's mind-boggling. This last week, what's going on right now in the email, that was some reporter for the Jerusalem Post in his own personal blog after this terrorist attack took place. Basically, saw this thing where he just justifies the killing of Israelis. He said, "I don't like it. I don't want that to happen, but." I'm worried. I'm worried that they would take my post, what I've done over here, justify, more killing. But let's face it, we're an occupying nation, and they're entitled to do whatever they have to, including Israelis, kill Israelis to get back to. It's like, we're not occupiers. There's no historical basis whatsoever to this people and the land they're asking for. The whole thing is one big charade. If you don't believe me, ask the Arabs. Don't take my word for it. Go ask them. They'll tell you. They're not doing this. They're not doing this because of the fact that we're living in Israel. They're doing this because we live. Period. This is just a justification. This is the way they bring it out, right? And yet people think this way, and the Western world thinks this way, and so what does the Kosh Baruch Hu do? It's amazing. He sends them to New York. Actually, I have to hear
He's on there.
Never got around to it.
Right.
For 25 minutes, I've been thinking about this glass of water. Right? He sends them to New York, and they blow up the Twin Towers, destroy the entire thing, and massacre people, and the world still comes down on the Jewish people instead. And then he sends them to different parts of the world, and they go there with Sharia law, right? There's another thing floating this week was an article from Toronto, where this reporter for the Toronto Sun was walking downtown, and he happened to see a mosque, and wanted to take a picture. So he started taking pictures, and this Arab woman runs out and basically starts yelling at him, telling him he can't do it. He says, "Lady, this is it's Toronto. It's a free country. I can take a picture in public where I want to." Right? So she's demanding his camera. Now a crowd of Arab men surround him, demanding the camera. This guy's getting nervous, so he sees police on bicycles because it's like what do you call it? It's like a walkway. It's like a
pedestrian walk.
Yeah. What do you call those things? Fancy name for those things. No, what's the fancy word?
Where there's no cars, it's just like sign.
Yeah, like Ben Yehuda's. Like what are those things called? Whatever. You get the idea. So he's he runs over to them and he tells them what happened. Oh no, because what happened? Because she hits him. She punches him in the face. Right. So he runs over and he comes to the police and he says, I've been assaulted. She's done this thing. He explains the whole thing. There are two Syrian, like a husband and wife, Syrians who saw the entire thing, who were so disgusted by what had happened, they actually came up with this guy to act as witnesses against her, and all that took place.
Wow.
right? So the police, started asking questions like, well, was it an open hand? Was it a closed hand? It's like the end of the day, one policeman walks over to this woman. She asks, "Do you hit this guy?" So she says, "Well, I actually didn't hit him. I didn't mean to hit him. I was actually trying to grab his camera instead. But I happened, his face got in the way, and I happened to hit him, So the police dropped the whole thing. This guy walked away thinking to himself, like, no, so somehow, okay, that damaging people's property is a good enough reason to hit a person in the face. But the whole thing was totally ridiculous. And what happened in Norway, what happened in Denmark, and different places where Sharia law just takes over, and there's no regard whatsoever. Because Baruch says, take a look at these people and see what they think and how they act. You don't understand. You're an infidel. If you're not one of them, you're an infidel. That's the way they think. That's their whole line of thinking. And you're an enemy, and you deserve death or stoning, whatever the case may be, if you don't become one of them. That doesn't make a difference which land you're occupying. From that perspective, the Americans are also occupiers, because as long as you're not a Muslim, you are an occupier of Arab land, of Muslim, because the whole world belongs to them. That's their philosophy. That's the way. That's what they read. That's what they teach us. What they tell. Just go on YouTube, watch one after the other. It's incredible. Everybody can see it for themselves. It doesn't change a thing. So there's a medrash, the Gemara, that says that Rabbi Bar Chana, the famous medrash, where he goes out on a boat, they're sailing, they get to an island, they alight on this island, and they light on this island a fire, and they cook and they bake and all, right? It turns out, lo and behold, even though there's grass in this thing, that's what fooled them, it was a fish. And the fish turns over, and they fall into the water. And the Medrash says, if it wasn't for the fact the boat was so close by, we would have drowned instead. So Rabbi Yaakov says, this really happened? Unlikely. It's a Medrash. There's a mashal here. What's that name show? It's talking about Achris Yamin, at the end of days. And the Nimshal is like this. At the end of days, and this is like, he's explained this in the 1800s before there was any concept. This is the Ottoman Empire. There's no way to imagine the Jewish people getting back to the land at this time. It's like a dream for the future. But he's talking, he says, at the end of days, the Jewish people will have the land, and not only will they have the land, but they'll be ruling over a people. And this people they'll rule over, they will not treat exactly the right way, and we didn't. I mean, I remember when I first got here in the 80s, it was just incredible. I mean, coming from the Western world, as much as I wasn't so comfortable around Arabs, but coming from the Western world to see how people treat them literally like donkeys, the Macaulets, the streets, and all that, it's like, they're not my favorite people, but still, there's dignity, and not forget about dignity. I mean, don't forget about dignity, but still, if you're asking for trouble, they're going to hate you. They're going to hate you. They're going to turn against. It was so clear they would turn against us. The way they're being, no one can survive that type of treatment. The way they're being treated. And I once had a whole argument with the person in Macaulay who insisted on telling me that they're donkeys, and that's why we treat them like donkeys. Yeah, and okay, that's what Medrash says. Exactly what we're going to do, because we'll think there's no way they can rebel. That's what the Medrash says, right? And what happens instead? We light the fire, meaning that we treat them properly. And because of the heat, because of the improper treatment, improper behavior, so they will turn the plate over in its mouth. That's what the Medrash says. That's the fish turning over. And the Medrash says that if Mashiach is ready, we'll be okay. But if Mashiach, that's the boat, right? If Mashiach is not ready, we will drown the majority of the problems they create for us. That's a remarkable Medrash. That's right down to the, no one knew what that meant 25, 30, 40 years ago. But today, it's incredibly obvious that thing has come true. So everything going on today is due historical process. It was known back then. So if that's the case, then what difference does it make what we do as a result of that? Because, as you see, that basically, and that's what the Medrash is telling us, and that's what Rosh is telling us, the Gemara is telling us, that's what Rosh Hashanah tells us, what life tells us basically, is that on Rosh Hashanah, you're going to be evaluated for the role you played in God's master plan. Your free will, which is chashuv, is so chashuv because Baruch has not brought Mashiach yet because it's so chashuv. He's waiting till the last second to mizaki you with your bechira because the whole world comes down to bechira. The whole point of creation is bechira. So what's my bechira for? to decide what role I will play. Moshe Rabbeinu, he's held back. He can't do the Maisa. So imagine, so Pinchas could come along and take what was rightfully his. But not Tzlacha, teach a halacha, because it was rightfully theirs to teach the halacha. They made themselves into the kind of people who loved Eretz Israel, and therefore the schus to teach a halacha that had to be taught. It was going to be taught at some point in time. It wasn't the Kodesh Baruch Hu said, "Oh, that's a good one. Didn't think of that one. Let's put that one down also in the Torah as well, right? Since it's still open, the link is still fresh. Let's add that one." No, it was meant to be taught. And the halach of Kanoim poking bomb for sure it's meant to happen. Zimri got, but who's going to be the Pinchas? Who's going to be the Zimri? Who's going to be the Kal? Which role are you going to play in the end? That's the world in which we live right now. That's the job that we have right now. That basically history runs its course. And I'll just finish off with a mashal that is a driving force for me. I mean, my Rosh HaShavua of Noach Weinberg, it's it's amazing. I just find, even after all the years I've been away from Torah for a long time, I have not been involved, and I lost touch pretty much with Noach. Every time I saw him, it was nice to get together again. But I just find it's amazing how much of hashpah, the short amount of time I spent there, how much just keeps coming up in my life over, because he had an incredible way of extracting the most important point and expressing in a very clear, precise way. This whole seminar is based upon a statement, a program, a program. Brilliant, statement that sums the entire thing up. He had a story. The story was basically about being they came from Slonim, Chassidim, and they had a family get together. And Slonim is very, very. They're all chashuvim, but Slonim is very well known. It's a very chashuv, a lot of Chassidus. And with Yaakov Weinberg, his brother, with Noach, they left it. They became Litviks instead. And but at a family get together one day, one of his cousins approached him and said to him, he said, Noach, we have illustrious ancestors in the grave who, if they brought back one Chozer B'Tshuvah, it was a major significant event, and they tell me about you brought back hundreds, if not thousands by now, right? He says, what's your schus? What schus do you have? So you got the mashal of a guy who gets off the boat. He's walking down, downtown New York. He's what they call a greener. Came from Europe, a small shtetl, doesn't know technology, hasn't seen big, huge cranes. He sees this big, huge block of stones being carried in the air, and the foreman's got his hand underneath it. Kilu, he's carrying it. And from the distance, the guy can't see the wire, the whole thing, so he assumes this guy's carrying it with one hand. So he's like total shock, and he runs down the street. By the time he gets to they put the stones down, right? And he says to the foreman, he says, how did you do that? His best broken English, right? How did you do that? He said, do what? He says, how did you carry all those stones with one hand yet? He says, what, are you crazy? I didn't do that. I saw myself, your hand. He said, no, you see that big, huge wire, the crane, that thing was carrying it. I put my hand underneath it. The kilo was like guiding it and moving it, but I had nothing to do with it. It just looked that way. So Noach said that when our illustrious ancestors lived, it was not the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to bring back Bali Tshuva. So therefore making one was very difficult. It wasn't the avir, the atmosphere, which just wasn't there. So the amount of work, the haskala, it's like there's forces going in the other direction, pulling people away. He says, but in our generation, clearly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu intends to make Bali Tshuva. And he's asking people who wants to put their hand underneath the load and make it look like they're the one carrying it. That's all you're seeing. I just have to put my hand underneath it. I don't mean, because Baruch Hu's doing it in the end. That's the masha for all of life. Because Baruch Hu, his plan, his story, it's running its course. It's running its course. No matter, we try so hard. That's why it came so close, and yet Mashiach doesn't come. Yeah, that's because he wasn't going to. Okay, so he can come at any point in time. He can come early. Yeah, we believe in all that stuff. But Lamaisa, he still hasn't come yet. And the Gemara says there's two ways for Mashiach to come, but more than likely come the second way, which is not the nice way. So what am I supposed to do? So the Rizal says it has nothing to do with your personal portion of what to come. Whatever history does. You try to open a business, it succeeds, it fails, whatever. You did the best you could. But you can't control all the results. You can't control all that's going to take place. You can't control whether or not you're going to succeed. The question is going to be, did you play the role you're supposed to play? Did you do the best you could with your free will? Kol b'di shemayim chutz m'hir shemayim means, basically, in its essence, did you do the best you could to be an Eved Hashem? Doing it the right way. That's the whole evaluation. That's what transforms a person into a Ben Olam HaBah. That's what allows a person to actually rise above the everyday Torah that we live with to a level of Torah Tzitzilas, to a whole different Madreg, a whole different Darga, to go to break beyond those boundaries where all the nisim, the flows start to happen for a person like that. It's a tough path to go, but a person has to know that. The starting point is to know the Torah that we have in our possession today, that we're living in a very material, physical world, but everything, by definition, as mundane, as tactical, and as tacky as some things might seem to be, the shorish is eternal. Latch onto that. It will pull you to much greater heights. And realize that how much higher level Torah, try to bring out the best koiches that you have, and use it the best way you can to be true of Hashem.